My name is Flavio Labiano, and you're listening to the Cinematography podcast.
The following podcast contains explicit language. You're listening to the Cinematography podcast presented by Hot Rod Cameras, a program about the art, craft, and philosophy of the moving image and the people who make it happen. Coming to you from the world headquarters of Hot Rod Cameras in Hollywood, California, are your hosts, Ben Rock and Ilya Friedman.
Hey, Ben.
Hey, Ilya, how you doing?
I've been better.
Yeah, it's bad news today. We're really sad.
It is. A really good friend of mine and the show passed away this weekend. His name is Dan Neese, and if you go back through the archives of the show, you'll find his episode, but you won't have to, actually. We're going to cut together a little thing for him and rerun it this week sometime. So I think after this episode goes live, we'll have a special sort of like mini Dan Neese tribute where we rerun his interview from several years ago.
Yeah, I first met Dan with you at the ASC Clubhouse the year that I went with you to the ASC Awards. And he was a character. He was funny. He had crazy hair. He just had a million amazing stories and just a warm heart. And if you've watched a movie in the last 40 years, you've probably seen some of his work. Probably my favorite thing of his, and I kind of gush about this in the interview with him, is he did Steadicam on the entire opening sequence of the Wes Craven movie Scream. And it's just some gorgeous, beautiful Steadicam work. But, more than anything, Dan was he was very helpful. He was warm. He was a friendly guy. A friend of mine who's another Steadicam operator told me today that Dan helped him out and gave him some replacement part that he needed, and he didn't even know him. He's just he was kind of a light in the cinematography world, beloved by many, and definitely we're going to miss him. He died too young, and I was looking forward to seeing what else he was going to do, because he was sort of moving into being a cinematographer primarily for the last several years. But he did some amazing collaborations with David Lynch and, like I said, Scream. If you look him up, he has an amazing filmography.
The Hollywood Reporter did a really nice sort of tribute to him today, and maybe we'll put a link to that in our show notes. But really, the outpouring that I've seen in the last 24, 48 hours, just on Facebook and elsewhere, is wonderful tribute and shows how Dan Neese touched so many people and how he really was one of the good guys. There's plenty of people in this town who are bad actors. They or maybe they reach a point where they're tolerated, and it's easy, I think, to get jaded. But Dan really always was very genuine, true to himself, self-effacing, and really just sort of like a beautiful person to have around you anywhere.
And may I say also funny as hell, a really funny guy, fun to talk to.
Particular sense of humor for sure.
Great stories. Yeah.
So yeah, we'll run some more, and we're going to skip doing any other sort of close focus today, because really I don't know how you follow Dan, but who's on the show today? How do we move forward? Yeah. Who's on the show?
Ham-handed segue into amazing cinematographer Flavio Labiano, who shot a little movie you might have heard of. Maybe it's on your radar. A little tiny indie film called Jungle Cruise.
Jungle Cruise. Yeah. It doesn't ring any bells.
Yeah, it's got a couple of up-and-coming actors in it, like this dude named Dwayne Johnson. I think he was a wrestler or something.
Oh, yeah. I think I've heard of him once or twice. Yeah.
And it was made for a little indie outfit called Disney. I'm going to drop this bit now.
Wait, is that the one with Mary Poppins?
It is. But with Flavio, as soon as it came up that we could talk to him, as I always do, I was looking through his filmography, and one just jumped out of IMDb at me, and it's a movie that I've been telling people about forever, and I've seen it several times, and totally coincidentally happened to have watched it 2 or 3 weeks before the interview, and that's Timecrimes, which is the most bonkers time travel weird thriller movie you could ever see.
When was that made? How long ago?
I saw it, I believe, at Fantastic Fest in 2008.
Oh,
it was
12
like
years.
It was like 2007, 2008. Yeah, so it's not like an ancient movie, but it you know, it's been around for a while. You can definitely get it on Amazon Prime. Super nuts. I love a movie that kind of takes a time travel concept and just twists it around upon itself. But while I was talking to Flavio, he kept bringing up a movie, and I'm going to mention it now because I hadn't seen it before I did the interview. It's called The Day of the Beast that he made in Spain, and apparently it was the huge phenomenon indie film. He said it was like Pulp Fiction in Spain, or in Europe rather, that year, 1995, 1996. And I was kind of ashamed that I hadn't seen it because he seemed very excited about it. So later that night, I found it on Tubi, which is, it's a streaming service that's ad supported. It has lots of movies on it, and it was on Tubi. And that movie's ripshit bonkers. I was very excited to see it. And I actually emailed him to tell him, like, thank you for recommending it. It's about a priest who kind of like decodes something in the book of Revelation, or in one of the books of the Bible, I guess, that says that the devil is about to have a child, like right now at that point in time. And so he sets about to sin as much as he possibly can so that he can meet the devil and destroy him.
Yeah, so I know how you appreciate a real ripshit bonkers movie, and that certainly sounds like it.
It's pretty nuts. It's interesting to look at a movie from the 90s and have enough distance from the 90s to be like, that looks like a 90s movie, but it's really good. It's really well done. His cinematography is awesome in it, but I mean, like, top to bottom, I was just riveted. It's one of those movies where I'm like, I have literally no idea what's going to happen next. It's so well done. So if you have Tubi, definitely check it out. But anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead into our interview with Flavio Labiano.
The Cinematography Podcast Interview.
So I am here today, transcontinentally, talking from Los Angeles to Berlin to Flavio Labiano, DP of Jungle Cruise. So congratulations so much for that, and thank you for making time to come talk to us.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
So, I mean, let's start by talking about Jungle Cruise. You know, obviously Disney is going through their full catalog of theme park attractions that aren't movies and turning them into movies. A friend of mine actually is currently an AD on the upcoming Haunted Mansion movie. So when I was watching the movie, I immediately felt like I was very clever for noticing the very subtle Werner Herzog nod by having a character named Aguirre be a conquistador and having lots of stuff happening on the river in the Amazon. So it felt like that it's sort of like somewhere between Aguirre, the Wrath of God, and Fitzcarraldo. Did you all look at any Herzog movies as visual reference? Because, I mean, your movie has that Disney polish to it.
Yeah.
Aguirre was a conquistador actually from the Basque Country, from where I am from. You know, He was a guy from.
I know he was real, but I feel like to have a character named Aguirre and also to set something on not a river boat, but like a boat going through the river doing incredible stuff. Like, it's impossible. Maybe I'm crazy. Am I crazy? It felt
No. I think you probably are right. I think a lot of coincidence. You know, they had to come with a name from a conquistador, kind of the boss of the conquistadors.
Yeah.
And Aguirre was actually in history, was one of the, the biggest guys and probably one of the cruelest guys they ever existed, And there's this famous story about him that when he died, the locals, the Indians, just cut his head and put it in a bird cage and hang it from a tree in case he was ever gonna come back, But no, I think there are a couple of coincidences. I think one is Aguirre, called him Aguirre because, as I said, was another one, Fitzcarraldo together with Aguirre and the boat and the Amazon. So yeah, they're both. But there are two movies that you probably know that's nothing to do with each other. One is, as you said, it's a romantic comedy in an exotical place, and the other one is a story of pretty much of a madman who was a madman. Aguirre was a crazy.
Well, and Aguirre, the Wrath of God is like, I think they didn't even have lights. Like, it's almost all shot with natural light on a 16 millimeter camera that Herzog had stolen or something. Like, the story of making that movie is bonkers. Could not possibly be further from making a big movie for Disney.
I can tell you the difference one to the other. One was done in the Amazons, and the other one was done in a parking lot in Atlanta. Those are the big difference. On exterior parking lot in Atlanta, this is how we shot 80% of Jungle Cruise, which is hard to believe. but that's the truth.
Yeah. I mean, I was wondering that when I was watching it, because obviously there's some stuff that's VFX driven. You know, there's a lot of really amazing and gorgeous VFX in the whole movie, but I was wondering how much of it was shot in a real forest or in a real, like in a real location. Some of it looked outrageously real. Were parts of it done on a real river through the woods?
The first act, the whole town, Portobello in the Amazon, that was shot in Hawaii. The whole spot until the boat takes off to the Amazons. Mm-hmm. So all that big first scene where you see the boat in the summer, all that stuff was built in a beautiful set that we built in Hawaii. It was a privilege to even design the set, because we designed the set with the same orientation on the sun than we did the tank where we shot most of the interiors of the boat. So there was the boat just moved around in Hawaii, but all the scenes in the boat or aboard the boat were done in a tank, in the real tank, because it's very complex to shoot in an actual water, So we shot all the in control area. So once we leave Portobello, which is that town that they built for the first act, then we just go into complete, CG work. We never.
All of it CG, like the whole.
Well, we shot, as I said, the big whites. Yeah, it's all done. I mean, we sent the crew to the Amazon and shot a bunch of plates, of course, and they pretty much, put a boat in some of those plates, But we shot 20% of the movie in Hawaii in that location, and the rest all in Atlanta. Yeah.
Wow. Now, when you're doing something that's like so VFX driven, how much, say, like if you're doing a thing and we're in the boat and the sun is supposed to be in the western side, whatever, of the boat, how much input do you end up having in the way the CG is set up to match the shots that you created?
Well, it's pretty complex. I mean, it's just a matter of, planning and prepping, hard prepping. We were lucky because we had experience of The Shallows. I don't know if you saw that movie.
I did, yeah.
Yeah. So that movie was shot again, the whole movie on a tank. So we put in a tank, we put the rock, we put the buoy, we put the well. It was shot all in a big swimming pool. So we have to find the locations of the beach. We found the locations. We figure out how the sun got the location. Then you go to the tank, you use the same sun. It's pretty much like a lot of homework you have to do, trying to match the morning to the evening, and that's why always those blue screens work so well, when you can actually control the plates and shoot them together.
Yeah.
Most of the movies, especially big movies, people shoot the actors, right away, bam, bam, and then some plate unit goes and shoot the plates, and one has the sun on one side, the other one, so they always look this kind of strange, especially blue screen movies, they look like video games. In our case, we were lucky enough to do the actual plates and match them into the tank, But it's just prep and planning, It's pretty much that.
I mean, give me an idea. How long do you spend prepping and planning a movie of this complexity? Because I feel like there's probably very few scenes that don't have some VFX component to them.
This one a lot. I don't know. We shot 90 days, probably 90 or 100 days of prep we had, because as I said, it was very complex. We had to go to Hawaii, and then we have to actually build a whole tank. We have to actually from scratch, build the blues, build the walls, and figure out where the sun was gonna hit. So it was pretty complex and a lot of prepping.
I'm sorry. Were you working with like storyboards? Were you working with previs? Like what were the main tools you were leaning on to make sure that you could build these incredible sequences?
Yeah, some of the really big effects scenes, because of budgeting problems, we will do storyboards and some previs, the big effects scenes. But the rest pretty much was shot list and planning. You have to think the fact that if you shoot in the summer in Atlanta, the sun is straight up. Like it's just this hard sun. I don't know if you have been in the south in Atlanta. It's impossible.
I'm from Florida, so I know, and I've worked on several movies in Atlanta, so I get it.
So you know how fast the sun goes up, stays up, and then comes down. It's just this hard sun. So it was sophisticated, but our crew was very solid, and a bunch of them have done already movies that big and pirates, and so they were pretty used to deal with those kinds of.
Yeah, Atlanta is quickly getting one of the most solid crew bases in the world, I would say.
Correct. Yeah. It's probably in the winter. I've never been in the winter there, but in the summer, it's hot. You're fighting toppy sun, and the storms they come in the afternoon, and you're fighting this southern weather, you probably know better than
Well,
me.
yeah, Florida's even worse. But I was in the art department on this indie film once that shot, I think it was 24 days, and I counted how much time, and a lot of it was exteriors, and I counted how many hours we lost to getting ready for the rain to come in, and then battening down the hatches for the rain, and then unpacking, and it was basically like 2 full days of a 24-day shoot we lost.
Oh, yeah.
Just to dealing with rain. And
Every
Atlanta's
afternoon,
not very different.
every afternoon will be a storm. Every afternoon for 2 or 3 hours will be pour rain. It was, but when at the end you all those things. Normally you forget those things. You always try to forget.
Well,
that
yeah,
stuff,
I mean, every city has its compromises, and it's not that LA doesn't. We do have generally okay weather until this time of year. it's like supposed to be 104 degrees today. So let's talk a little bit about your career leading up to this. You've done quite a lot of stuff. Not as much of it might be as familiar to a lot of our American listeners, but you've been working forever and going back to the early 90s. And I'm just interested to know, what was the moment that you realized cinematography was a track you wanted to pursue?
Actually, I have to say, it was very simple, So I went to FI and I did my thesis film, and I was broke. I had to make a living. I went to shoot Corman movies down in Venice.
Oh, okay. So I somehow seem to have missed this in your filmography because I love hearing about Corman stories. We've had a lot of Corman people on here over the years.
So I shot Angel in Red. I did a couple of second units for a lot of friends from AFI, like Janusz Kaminski, who was doing also the same thing, and a lot of other friends, Wally, and a lot of guys who were not that
We've had Wally Pfister on here, and
I don't remember if Wally was. I don't remember Wally was on that gang or later. I don't know. What's that time?
He was. It was. I think a contemporary.
Phedon was doing one. Janusz was doing another one, and I started to do second. And then I do this one. They gave me finally the break, and I did this. Angel in Red, and then I knew from that moment that I had to do one and no more than one because
really? I just love hearing Corman stories. I mean, we've had a lot of Corman DPs. I don't know if you know Carlos Gonzalez. He was a Corman guy.
Who he is. I know who he is.
Mike Mickens. We've had Wally on. I just
Wally and Janusz Kaminski. He was there.
Oh yeah, no, I mean Janusz is obviously one of our somebody we hope to get on at some point. But yeah, I mean I could just hear those stories over and over again because I feel like there's something a little magical about Roger Corman. There are companies like the Asylum that are making crazy low budget movies and spraying them all over the inside of Targets and Walmarts. But there's nobody like a Roger Corman who is sort of a mogul of those movies, and so many just outrageously talented people. We had Ron Howard on the show once. Ron Howard came out of his first directing opportunity was for Corman, and so to me there's kind of a magical halo around it. Even though I know y'all had very little to work with and very little time and whatever, but I think unlike things like The Asylum, and maybe I'll get heat for saying this, I feel like Corman was trying to make good movies, even with limited means.
Mm-hmm. And then from there, I went back to Spain for something, and then one producer who used to be a camera assistant became a producer, and he said, "Oh, you have this project, very low budget project," and I said, "Yes, I have already one feature shot in Los Angeles," and I didn't tell it was Corman. So, then I got another job, and since then, I've been very, very lucky, and very, very, very lucky, and I've been doing one after the other. So I've been kind of non-stop since then. So, I've done almost 30 features right now in my life, and I'm getting more and more tired. But I've been very, very lucky.
At this point too, you're working at the top of all the features. Making stuff like Jungle Cruise.
Well, I don't live in LA anymore. I used to live in LA, and then I moved out of LA. And that changes completely your career. Once you moved out from LA,
How so?
Well, I used to live in LA. After that, I lived for years there, and I was working. But at one point, I had, I grew up family, I had a kid, and I saw the whole thing, and I just thought that I should go back to Spain. So I just left Los Angeles and went back to Spain. I mean, I'm not saying that there was a big mistake, but I'm saying that, it's not so easy to be, as you said, on the big budgets with if you don't live in Los Angeles or unless in the US. But yeah, again, I've been very lucky. So
I'm curious about this too because I remember when I lived in Florida, somebody would be like, oh, they brought in this DP from LA, and everybody would be like, ooh. And then after you live in LA, you're like, throw a rock and you might hit a DP. It doesn't, like being a DP from LA doesn't mean that much. But when you go back to Spain and you've been working out here and you've been working on bigger stuff, does that make you more in demand in Spain or in whatever parts of Europe you have access to?
Not really. No, Once I left Spain for so many years, and I became sometimes they call me to Spain, but it's not usual. Not usual. Also, the movies have been made in Spain right now after these two big crises that happens in these 10 last years. They're very, 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 very low budget movies, and then you don't have the tools, you don't have the time. It's all it's a different way of completely approach of the movie.
So I think the first time I ever noticed your work was in a movie that we had talked about very briefly off mic beforehand, and that was Perdita Durango, which came out in the late 90s, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know if that was, you had your Corman movie, but was that sort of like the first, No.
No. So, as I said, I did a movie in Los Angeles for Corman, then I went to Spain, moved back to Spain one time because I got this other movie. Then in Spain, I started making movies, like I did 3 movies, and then Alex de la Iglesia, which is a Spanish director, I don't know if you know him, Alex de la Iglesia, he did this movie called The Day of the Beast. I don't know if you ever saw that movie.
I know of it, but I have not seen it.
All right. So that movie was, we didn't know each other. He met me. I'm doing this movie, which it's a low budget movie. It's about the devil, the priest and the devil. It was a great, and then we did the movie, and that movie, became a huge success for him, for me, for everybody, and from there on, both careers, we just and then we did.
So that was the springboard.
Yeah, that was like if you shoot Pulp Fiction or something like this in Spain, in LA, like something like that. That big, Yeah, it was a huge movie. I should recommend you to see it because you're gonna like it for sure.
I'm a huge horror fan, and so your description already makes me interested.
Yeah, it's about a priest. It's about a priest who who finds out that that in 3 days the world is gonna finish, and then he has to find the devil. It's one of those very, very comedy action movie and horror movie.
Cool.
It's just a genre I like. And with Alex, I started to do movies, and then this big producer bought the rights for the Barry Gifford novel Perdita Durango, and then we all came to the U.S. and Mexico, and it was a Spanish production, big production shot in those two countries. So it was a lot of with Javier Bardem was starring.
Yeah.
And James Gandolfini.
I think that might be the first thing I ever noticed him in too. Like that was really interesting.
I really recommend you to see The Day of the Beast if you can, man, because
I will track that down.
They just did a whole remastering in LA.
Oh, really?
And it's pretty fun. Yeah, it's a fun movie to watch.
Now, when you're going back and remastering something like that, do you ever find yourself noticing something in the footage that you had never noticed before because you're now able to easily look at it in a higher resolution than you were back then?
Well, yeah, it's very hard to see these movies. I mean, it's very hard for me to see them because you see all the mistakes and you see these, these things that you try and you didn't success. And I have my own theory about being a cinematographer. I really don't consider myself. I don't think they consider anybody like an artist with a big A. Like I read all these bullshit interviews about the art and every time they interview one comes out with big old Renaissance painters and. I don't think it has nothing to do with that. Cinematography, I think it's a craft. It's a craft that you learn. And like any other craft, you learn by mistake, try and risk a mistake, and you try to get, in your way. But not more than a shoemaker, who learns how to do the double knot and to tie it on, and then the shoe doesn't break. So cinematography is basically that. You go with this thing like, all right, I'm going to try this, and oh my God, it didn't come out. And then when it comes out, it's a lot of successful. So that's how I think is considered a craft, a craft that you're learning with the years.
Yeah.
So when you see all those early movies, you were like, oh my God, why did I do that? Why did I put the camera there? Why did I all those things like, oh, I know so much now. I would have done it, in 2 shots instead of 16. That kind of stuff, that you learn with the years,
So when you talk about like perfect camera placement, this brings me into one of your movies that I most wanted to talk about, and that's Timecrimes, which I think I saw at Fantastic Fest in 2008. And then I thought it was awesome and got it on DVD and showed it to my wife and some of my friends. And, I'd seen it a bunch of times. And then totally coincidentally, before I even knew I was interviewing you, I stumbled across it on Amazon Prime and watched it a few weeks ago. And that movie really holds up. But it speaks about what you're talking about, because that movie is so much about seeing exactly only what you need to see at every given moment. For people who haven't seen it, it's a very pared down time travel story about kind of this middle-aged man who gets sucked into this time travel. I don't even know, like, he travels back in time and doesn't even realize that he's traveled back in time and has to do all these crazy things to get himself to do the right thing in the past. And
well, that's all. Yeah, I mean, that's all Nacho. I don't know if you know Nacho Vigalondo, the director. I don't know if you know him, but
I mean, I don't personally know him, but I know.
Well,
his work.
yeah, but that's a brilliant mind.
So much of it is about restricting the main character and the audience's point of view, right down to the fact that the main character is looking at things through binoculars. So you're just seeing what he sees through the binoculars a lot. And kind of what you were saying earlier about like finding the perfect place for the camera. It's like also finding the perfect place where if the camera was 10 feet to the side, he would see something that would give away the story later.
The more you see the movies subjectively, especially some kind of movies, then the more you hook up the audience. You see everything through someone's point of view, then you can grab the audience and just make them do whatever you want.
Well, and so it was, maybe a few years later when you shot Unknown, but like, I feel like, I mean, you've obviously done some other action-y stuff, but, getting into the full-on Liam Neeson mode, and you shot a couple of Liam Neeson action movies, like that's almost a genre into itself. And when I was looking up your work, I came across kind of a side-by-side comparison that maybe we can link in our show notes, that was showing like the shots in the movie and then you shooting them at the same, like it was like a split screen. I don't know if you've seen that.
No, I haven't seen that.
If you look,
what is that?
I want to say it was from Unknown. No, I'm sorry, it was from Nonstop. If you Google your name and cinematography, you will find this video. It was really interesting. It looked like, I don't know, we don't really do DVD extras anymore, but it looked like something that you would have as a DVD extra. It was really interesting just to kind of see those behind the scenes things. But like, probably around 10 years ago, Liam Neeson, probably starting with Taken, Liam Neeson becomes sort of a one-man action franchise. Like you have a certain expectation. Mm-hmm. But I feel like in those Liam Neeson kind of movies, you don't have all the money in the world, but it's just like good old-fashioned craft to kind of suck you in and hold your attention.
Yeah, it's what Hitchcock did for years. You just have, it's all psychological in your mind, and you watch one of those Hitchcock movies, and it's just that. It's just these thrillers with characters, with psychology. It's just the whole thing. It's a genre in itself, And I don't know, maybe it's not popular anymore, but I kind of like them. I like them a lot. It was a golden age. They did them very well. Thrillers, But now it's all, it's all, fireworks, or it's two people talking in an apartment, on a behind a white wall,
But again, I go back to Timecrimes, which is a movie that I dare anyone listening to me to like go to Amazon Prime, watch if you have it, start watching Timecrimes and tell me it doesn't suck you in the first 5 minutes, and you're going to be wondering until the last second of the movie what the hell is going on. Not in a bad way. In it, like it's just such an intriguing mystery, kind of wrapped in another mystery. It's so much fun. Well, I've taken enough of your time.
It's all right, man. It's all right.
So, Flavio, thank you so much for coming on the show. Everybody, if you haven't already checked out Jungle Cruise, please go check out Jungle Cruise. It's amazing. And also just take my advice. Watch Timecrimes. It's definitely worth seeing. It's an amazing scaled down thriller with science fiction elements. So thank you again, Flavio. Thanks for coming on.
Oh, thank you.
All right, so that was Flavio Labiano. Congratulations on all of the success of Jungle Cruise, and he couldn't tell me what it was, but while I was interviewing him, he was in Berlin shooting some exciting new movie. So
I'm sure we'll find out shortly.
And now, short ends.
So, Ilya, it is that time for our international award-winning segment, Short Ends.
Yes.
It won an award at World Fest Houston. Let's not talk about it.
Okay, we won't.
What is your pet obsession this week?
Well, it almost sounds like an ad for Aperture, because I got to talk about something new that Aperture is doing, but they're a really innovative company and they came out with this really cool light. I've talked about it on the show a couple of times, called the 600D. It's a 600 watt, extremely bright light, and they're updating it. And actually today, the show that's dropping today, the formal announcement's being made, but they're having a new version of this light come out called the 600X. And they've already teased it a little bit, but it is a 600D that is now bicolor. So it's not just daylight, it's also tungsten flavor of white.
Sweet.
And you can adjust anywhere in the middle. So a 600 watts, but I'm going to guess it's probably like 300 watts of tungsten, 300 watts of daylight. So it's kind of like having 300 lights kind of together as one. And, I think that, I guess at 4,300, then it's probably going to be very, very bright, which would be somewhere in the middle. But it's getting the full typical Aperture launch treatment tomorrow or today, as you're hearing this, and it'll be on the Hot Rod Cameras website, and it'll be probably all over the internet. But it's going to be, one of the brightest, smallest, least expensive bicolor lights out there, and it's going to be compatible with all the usual Aperture stuff. And so I think it's going to be a big deal. We have a ton of 600Ds that we've been selling lately, but I think that there's some people now who are going to say, give me that 600X. And the one thing that's going to drive a few people crazy is it's not quite ready to ship. It's still probably going to be a couple of months before that really starts to roll out there.
Interesting. Well, that's still cool though.
Yeah, it's cool. It's going to be a really good light, and I think that we will be talking about it as it gets closer into a thing. But yeah, it's I had a little bit of inside information about it, just a tiny bit. As a dealer, they give us a little bit of a heads up, saying, hey, just so you're aware, they want us to be able to hit the ground running and be able to tell people, because after they make that announcement tomorrow, I expect a bunch of people are going to call and say, hey, remember that 600D I wanted? Well, now I want a 600X. So not everyone. Some people will still want the higher horsepower, so to speak, of the 600D, and they're not really too concerned about changing colors. But for some people out there, it's going to be a real boon. They're going to really like it. So Ben, what's your pet obsession on here, our internationally award-winning segment, Short Ends?
Firstly, I want to do a very quick follow-up on last week's Short End, which was the podcast, The Plot Thickens, about the making of Bonfire of the Vanities and The Devil's Candy and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. So after listening to, the whole podcast hasn't dropped. I think there's one or two more episodes yet to come. But I was like, I wonder if I can watch Bonfire of the Vanities, because I saw it in the theater. I remembered literally nothing about it. You could have put a gun to my head before I listened to the podcast, and I couldn't have told you who was in it. I knew nothing. I wouldn't have remembered that De Palma directed it. I wouldn't have remembered Tom Hanks, Melanie Griffith, or Bruce Willis. And anyway, so it's on HBO Max, and I watched it. And here's the crazy thing: it's not that bad.
You liked it now. It's good.
I mean, I'm not going to say I like it. I feel like a lot of the racial politics are horrifically out of step with today, like way out of step. Like, people would be very mad about it, about specifically the portrayal of African Americans in that movie. It's kind of, I understand that the movie itself is kind of a cartoon, but the African American portrayal is extra cartoonish a lot of times. And supposedly they changed the judge from a white guy to Morgan Freeman to kind of soften the racialness of it, because the judge is sort of the Jiminy Cricket, if you will, of the entire movie. Like, he's definitely the conscience of the movie. But and Bruce Willis is weird casting in it, but it reminded me that Bruce Willis used to be like a gifted comedy guy.
All right, let me interrupt you just one second here, Ben. Your short end this week is your short end from last week?
No, I was just doing a quick follow-up. Follow-up because
this isn't quick anymore.
I'm sorry. So this was almost my short end last week, and I decided to go with The Plot Thickens, but I think this is extra cool and people should check it out. And I don't have a release date on it yet, but Phil Tippett, stop motion genius, Phil Tippett, worked on the Star Wars movies. He invented a kind of stop motion called Go Motion that was used in a movie called Dragon Slayer that enabled them to create a blur frame when they took the shot so that it made the motion look more natural. And if you don't believe me, go on Amazon Prime and watch Dragon Slayer. The dragon effects in that, I will put them against Game of Thrones. I'll put them against modern stuff.
Whoa.
It's so good. And he was supposed to do stop motion dinosaurs for Jurassic Park when the whole computer revolution kind of ripped the rug out from under him, but he still remained as a supervisor. So for 30 years, Phil Tippett has been noodling around with a film called Mad God.
Okay.
And you can now see the trailer for Mad God. It's been finished, and supposedly, like, at his studio, which I think is in Northern California, he had started and stopped and started and stopped, and some of the younger people who were working with him discovered what he did and kind of went in and helped him finish it. And it's a feature. I think it was at Cannes this year. I could be wrong about that. But go watch the trailer for it. He's definitely a one-of-a-kind artist. He hasn't really directed that many things. I think this is like his third or fourth directing credit. But if you look him up, again, he worked on the Star Wars movies and the Indiana Jones movies and Dragon Slayer. Like, I remember I was a young kid when I saw Dragon Slayer, but I remember just being blown away because I was a fan of stop motion. And my father's friend, who I've actually talked about on the podcast when he passed away about last year, Bobo Goldberg, explained Go Motion to me. And he was my filmmaking mentor as a young kid. And he explained what Go Motion was. And it was just like, whoa, because they would put, I guess, like a servo or robot arm or something in there and then do a longer exposure and move the stuff. And it makes the motion look extraordinarily natural.
I've seen Dragon Slayer. I'm looking at the cover art right now. That was totally at the video store I worked at.
Yeah, Dragon Slayer is a really interesting kind of medieval movie. There were a bunch of medieval-ish movies that were very popular around that time. Beastmaster and The Sword and the Sorcerer. And there were several. It was kind of a trend. And Dragon Slayer, I think, kind of tanked. But it's one of those movies that people remember fondly. And I watched it probably about 2 or 3 years ago, and it's shocking how good the effects hold up. I feel like CGI effects often don't age well, and stuff like stop motion always feels like it did the day that you saw it because the technology doesn't really change. So when you watch a movie like that where it's basically stop motion, but they've added several wrinkles to it to make it more fluid and more natural looking, it's pretty astonishing. Anyway, but
84% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I love the movie, but I'm just excited to see Mad God. I've been hearing about Mad God. I think I probably for the first time heard about it 10 years ago. And it's something that I'm very, very much looking forward to seeing released and seeing somehow if I can see it on the big screen.
It sounds awesome. I got to go check out this trailer now. So that sounds really cool.
Do it. So Ilya, who do we need to thank this week?
Oh, let's thank Ben Katz. Ben Katz, thank you for editing us.
Good hustle this week, too. Oh, my God. We threw it all at you at the last minute.
Oh, don't wait. There's more.
Oh, that's true.
All right. Let's thank Kays Al-Atrakchi.
Kays, who surprisingly is probably listening to this right now.
Yeah, listening to us.
Hi, Kays.
Hanging on every word. Yeah.
How's it going? And last but definitely not least, Alana Cody, our intrepid producer, who just today even had me at a screening of a movie with a cinematographer who is, I wasn't at the screening with the cinematographer. The movie was shot by an outrageously legendary cinematographer who's been doing stuff most of my life, and I cannot wait to talk to this person. It's a fascinating. I'm not going to blow it. I'm not going to talk about it yet.
Yeah, I really thought you were about to.
I'm not gonna.
All right. Well,
mostly because I don't know if there's an embargo on that screening.
Yeah, I don't know. There could be.
Might be. So anyway, that is it. Ilya, where can people find you online if they're looking for you?
They can find me over at Hot Rod Cameras, hotrodcameras.com, and all the social type of stuff. I'm usually there. There's only a couple of Ilya Friedmans out there, and they're mostly me.
There's a surprising number of Ben Rocks, actually, and I've befriended at least one of them.
They don't go by Benji or Ben.
No, there's at least that I know of 2 other Ben Rocks floating around in America, and one of them is a D&D dungeon master, and he's up in Washington State, and he's like 10 years younger than me, but has a kid about my son's age.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
You guys should have a Ben Rock convention.
I've thought about having a Ben Rock convention. We'd have to like get name tags with our middle names on them, probably.
That's right.
Anyway, so that about does it for us, and we will see you very soon because we're about to re-release the Dan Neese episode. But we'll see you next week with a totally new episode.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
This has been the Cinematography Podcast, presented by Hot Rod Cameras. Find your next camera, lens, or accessory on the web at hotrodcameras.com. Don't forget to subscribe to our show on iTunes and connect with us on Facebook and Twitter. Thanks for listening.